Hello, everyone. So today we have a student from the University of Pacific. Her name is Charlotte. And Charlotte, can you go ahead and just introduce yourself?
All right, hi, I'm Charlotte. I am a freshman, well, now a sophomore, at University of the Pacific. I am majoring in violin performance. So I'm in the Conservatory of Music. And I'm excited to be here, yeah, to talk about my experience.
That's awesome. And now, Charlotte, I think both of us actually talked about this before, this call. And so obviously, why did you decide to go into music? I feel like with a lot of Asian students, they've been like there's that stereotype that they should go into STEM, being a doctor, lawyer, engineer. It's not so common for Asian students to go into music. And like even though a lot of Asian students are pressured to, playing piano or doing some musical instrument, the fact of actually pursuing a education or a career in that is not so highly regarded. So why did you decide to go into music and what and like the entire process of it?
Yeah, so honestly, the biggest reason why I went into music was because that was pretty much the only thing that I was interested that I could see myself doing in life. I was so passionate about music for so many years, and for so many years I've been like, no, I can't do music. I'm an Asian person. Like music is
Yeah,
going to be a career that I can do in the future, and it's always been instilled in me that like going into the arts is not going to be a sustainable career. Um, and then when I got into high school, that's when I started meeting people who were actually in the arts. For example, my high school orchestra teacher, Miss Chen, she was one of the big reasons why, sorry, why I actually decided to continue and pursue music, because she gave me a different perspective on just what you can do with an arts degree. It doesn't have to be music. It could be any kind of, arts, performing, visual, whatever. Like there are careers you can have as a musician, as an arts major. It's not just, oh, I'm going to go into this and crash and burn. Like there's just so much more you can do. And if it's something you're really passionate about and it's something you can see yourself doing in the future with, a successful career of whatever your interest is, then, go for it. Like that was my perspective going into college apps. I know a lot of people apply for college and they're not really applying for what they want to do in the future.
yeah,
That's just not what their goal would ever be, but that's what they're doing because they think that's a viable monetary option when they, have to get a job and stuff. And I think that's just really disappointing because there's so many people who could fit so well into these arts careers or, just anything. Doesn't matter. It can be your STEM career too.
yeah.
Like so many people that can do something that they're really passionate about and do it well, but they just choose not to do it because they don't think that they can make money from it. And I think that's just not what a career should be about. That's not what your life should be about. So that was my, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's awesome. And I mean, I've been a musical player. I mean, we've been in the same school since like kindergarten too, and I always knew you were like a super musical person. Whether that be like orchestra, singing. I mean, even in your video background right now, you can see the guitar hanging from your wall. So obviously, yeah, like music is a huge passion for you, and I'm glad that you decided to stick with it and pursue it because I feel like um, even though there's concerns about finding a job or whatnot in the future, I think if you're enjoying what you're doing, then all the other things, like all those other aspects, like financial whatnot, will come naturally as long as you're, doing well with it. And you mentioned that there's a lot of musical careers that you've actually looked into or that you've heard from mentors and teachers in the past. So I guess what are some careers or like, you know, career paths that you're looking into in the future that you're planning to hopefully go for?
Yeah. So for any musician, whether you're an educator, a performer, management person, whatever, a lot of people generally have to teach. Like you teach private lessons, and that's definitely something that I will be doing, that I am doing actually. I've been starting to do that through the Pacific Community Music School. And my goal career in life is to be in an orchestra, a professional orchestra, an orchestral musician. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that's such a hard job to do. Like, people that are in these orchestras, they're in there forever. Like, it's hard to find a spot. But then again, there are people that, find spots. There are people who find careers in orchestras, whether it's, something as big as the LA Phil or something as small as like Pasadena Symphony. It's just, there are options. And maybe they're not as well known, but there are options. There are careers, even if it's just teaching. Like I know plenty of people who just teach and they're perfectly fine. Um, and it's just, you just gotta go for it. Like there are
Yeah.
options out there. You just have to really look for them and know what you want.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. I feel like a lot of students they worry about what job they're going to go into, and especially if it's like in a major that we've mentioned that's not so popular, maybe musical or arts,
Mhm.
or even like a humanities or STEM major that's not as highly regarded compared to, a typical engineering student, typical like political science. And I feel like a lot of students, they worry that whatever they're doing in college has to directly correlate into, stability and finding that career. So it's nice that, obviously you're mentioning that to explore those options, there's definitely a lot out there. You just have to go and find those. So I think that's really great to mention. Now, I guess like, touching up on University of Pacific itself. So why UOP? Like, why did you decide to go to this specific institution?
hmm So if I'm going to be completely honest, my college app process was kind of wild. So when I finally got the schools that I was actually accepted into, there weren't that many from the ones that I had applied to. And from those, I only had three options, and my top two were UOP and UCI. Um, I decided to choose UOP because I felt like I liked the environment a lot better. I felt like the conservatory there would be able to push me further in my career. UCI is great, not,
Yeah, for sure.
on anything. They had a great professor that I connected really well with, but I just personally felt like UOP, from the options that I had, would be the best kind of stepping stone towards grad school or whatever school.
Yeah,
And it's been really great. Like I have my violin teacher, she went to Juilliard for her master's and her doctorate. So like I'm getting that Juilliard education.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I think especially, this choosing colleges, I feel like, for the most part, when people what they see on the internet, they see on like internet rankings. If you compare like UC Irvine to UOP, I feel like a lot of kids would lean towards UC Irvine. I mean, just not even just for the musical aspect. The UC schools have been known for being very STEM heavy, or also humanities as well. But if you were to like to choose one, like for a major, most people would choose UCI. But I think it's really interesting that you mentioned, finding the best fit for you. It doesn't always have to be like whatever's top ranking or whatever's like nationally recognized as quote unquote the better school, because a better school I think is very subjective among every single person. It's very different. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it seems like UOP definitely was the better fit overall for you.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's just so many stigmas around colleges, and that's one thing I really did not like when I was applying to colleges. It was just I had to get into this name school. And when you're going into music, there are name schools for music
Yeah.
school. It's just people don't really, know them as well. Like I'm not going to go to Stanford for music. No offense. Like that's
Yeah,
just
no, I feel you.
known for music. So that was definitely a challenge trying to figure out like where should I go for music? What is good for music, even if that school is not a name school or whatever. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of schools out there that aren't like, Stanford or the Ivy League, that
mhm,
are even better than those schools for specific majors. And it just depends on, what the school is strong at, what they've been known for, and what they've been, nationally recognized. And, in your position, if UOP, obviously has the better musical program, or a program that fits you better, then obviously why would you not take that school over a school that maybe isn't so great? But yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, you mentioned the college application process really briefly. So I guess let's go back in time. Let's go back to when we were, starting off seniors, or just the whole college application process. Um, so I guess if you could just first off, how would you summarize your entire college application process? Like if you were to briefly summarize how it went, how would you describe that?
um, insane. Maybe one of the craziest periods of my life. My college app process was not good. Mentally not good. It was really crazy, especially because coming from, an Asian family where no one is in the arts, everyone is in like business or pharmacy or whatever, I don't know, something STEM.
Yeah,
Like I was on my own pretty much. Family wise, I was on my own. I had the support of my parents, luckily. They supported me doing this,
that's
but
awesome.
you know, they didn't know anything about applying for music. They were just like, "Oh, here you go for it. It's your thing."
Yeah,
But I did have other people who helped me, like my violin teacher, my private lesson teacher, and Miss Chen, my orchestra teacher. They were both the two people that really helped me figure out what were the colleges that I could apply to. Miss Chen was the one that actually suggested UOP. That's
mm.
right.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, and it was a lot of researching on my own, researching what different school options there were, where I could actually go, what would fit me as a person. Um, there was a lot of like mental challenges with it, obviously, because when you're applying for music, there's an extra step that people don't have to do when you're applying for like a STEM major or something. We have to do pre-screening auditions, which is basically you record yourself with whatever pieces that are required. You do a recording and you send it in, and if the school likes that recording, then they'll accept you into the live audition, which is the
Mm,
next step. So for me, there's like three steps. Versus other people, it's just submit your app and you get accepted, waitlisted,
yeah,
you know. So for me, it was like double the amount of pressure. And uh, high school was insane. Arcadia
yeah.
High School was really crazy. So I definitely did not have the amount of time that I wanted to be able to prepare myself for these pre-screening auditions. And to be honest, I was not aware of just how serious these auditions were and how important and how hard they would be. So I wasn't really ready for those auditions. I submitted recordings that if I, looked at them now, I'd be like, no, that's not acceptable. Um, but I had to do what I had to do. Those are the recordings I had. That's the best I could do in the moment. I submitted them, whatever happened, happened. And it was definitely a really challenging time to figure out like what I wanted in life. There was a point in the application process that I was like, maybe I'm just not fit for music. Like, I just can't do this. But I had a lot of support with people that maybe even weren't music majors who were like, no, I know you love doing music. I know this is what you want to do in the future. This is your passion. You have to pursue it. And there's always going to be, ups and downs with any career path. Um, you just got to keep going for it, keep pushing for it. And obviously it worked out so far.
Yeah.
But the application process for me was really crazy. And just because of that, the extra pressure of it being based on my talent and not just based on what somebody else wrote about me or what I wrote about myself, because that obviously plays a part. But in music auditions or music colleges, your application is 90% your audition.
Mhm.
Um, so that was really scary, being it based on my playing. But you know, you just kind of get through it. You find your place. I'm glad. I told my friend this one day. I was like, I'm glad I'm not going to some fancy music conservatory like I don't know, Indiana University or whatever. Like, I'm glad I'm not going there because I know now that if I had gone there at this point in my life, I would not be ready. Like, I would be that little fish in a big pond, and, my entire day would just be about, am I good enough for this? Like, I'm so stressed out. But now being at UOP, I feel like I'm more of a big fish in a little pond type of situation
Mhm.
where I feel like I can succeed. I feel like I am growing and not just putting pressure on myself all the time to be better than other people. So
Yeah.
just kind of have to believe in yourself for a couple months.
Yeah, no, definitely that's so true, especially since like I feel like I know actually another person mentioned this in a different video talking about how we always feel like we're comparing ourselves to others, and in your sense too, even in music, like those auditions, you are and essentially even more like being more competitive in that aspect because you have another component of it. And yeah, I feel like with arts majors, music majors as a whole, there's a lot more because you know regular students as in general already have trouble trying to manage essays and filling out the regular applications and still having to submit GPA and then your test scores. But then for being in music and arts, you have to submit a portfolio or you have to do like these extra auditions and screenings over and over. And it's stacks on each other. It's essentially like you're doing a whole nother application just for one school. So, obviously having to deal with school, your extracurricular activities and, your applications, what was your way of like balancing everything out? Like, do you think that you were able to find that balance at some point during the process?
hmm I think I felt like I was. I felt like I was doing okay, going down my mental path of just kind of okay. So to be honest, um, I felt like I was doing fine because my entire mindset was like, I can do this. I'm doing this. I'm going to do all of these things that I signed up for because I was in a lot of different organizations at school and
Yeah.
I happened to be an officer or a leader of pretty much all of them. And so, a lot of people relied on me to be the person telling them what to do and, where we're going with this organization. Um, but, if I'm going to be honest, like I could not do it. Like it was not working. I was not mentally stable at all. These organizations weren't getting the best leadership that they could because, I just couldn't split my time with this amount of work that I had to do for an application and all my schoolwork and all the organizations. It just wasn't working. But I wouldn't let myself believe that. And it took my private teacher coming to school, telling my orchestra teacher that I needed to take a break from these things.
Hmm.
Um, that's what it took for me to finally realize, like, no, you need to like back off, kind of figure yourself out first, let other people do more work. Because I micromanage a lot, which is,
Yeah.
it can be good, but it's also really bad when it comes to situations like that. Um, so that's where I kind of started learning how to not micromanage so much and to let other people help. And that's what was really important for me to actually really get through that process, because if I hadn't had people helping me um, with these organizations and letting my officers do more work, then a lot of things would have crashed and burned. But luckily they didn't. Things worked out, and it worked. So
Yeah. We're here now, so
we're here.
exactly. And you mentioned obviously there was a lot of difficulties and challenges that you faced. It for you, you mentioned sometimes things didn't work, and you can for this next question you can retouch up on mentioning that micromanage thing and how you overcame that. But if you could have changed anything, like if you go back and redo that entire process, which I mean obviously none of us want to redo it, but if you had to redo it, what would you change about it? Like what specifically would you fix to kind of help you like holistically through this process?
I think, I don't know if this would count because you can't really change that, but I would definitely try and make myself more confident in knowing what I want and knowing that I can do this, because I feel like if I had more confidence in myself just as a performer, as a musician, I would have, it would have been a lot easier to get through this. Because, every musician, every arts person faces this. They're like, oh, or just every person in general, they're like, I'm not good enough for this. I don't have the talent or skill to do this. And that really holds you back from doing the best that you can in whatever situation you're in. So I think if I could have just had a little bit more confidence in telling myself, like, no, you got this, like, you can play, you can perform, then maybe, like, the application process would have just been so much easier and smoother.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think confident is one thing. I think a lot of times we don't feel confident about ourselves because we try not we don't want to go past that confidence. You don't want to be cocky,
Mm.
but you don't also want to undervalue yourself. It's just trying to find that sweet point of telling yourself, "Oh, yes, you can do it," but being realistic at the same time. And I feel like yeah, that's definitely something to mention. It's something I don't necessarily I agree with you. Going back in time, I don't know if necessarily we could have changed that because it's something you develop throughout your entire time at high school or even from middle school and elementary school, just what's happened in your academic journey up until that point. But it's definitely true that trying our best to be as confident as possible within those specific reasons or confinement. But yeah, that's definitely a good point. All right, so I guess let's transition now to UOP because I feel like that's a lot happier than college applications.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so at UOP, I feel like a lot of these videos we've already done talk about how classes work for STEM students, for humanities students, but we haven't heard much about the class styles of like art students or music students. So I was wondering if you could just quickly describe, how are your classes like, what are you doing in your classes? Other than the ones, we have general education classes, those history, English classes we have to take, but how are your music classes like?
Yeah, so my first day at school was really fun because I've never had a school day where it was just music. Like my classes, I have, the G's or whatever, but my classes are pretty much just music, and I only have one or two non-music classes. And it works pretty much the same way any other class would work, any STEM class or non-music class would work. It's just we're learning about music. We're learning about music theory, music composition. I had to take a group piano class, which was interesting. And then, we have orchestra, which is a class now. I get credits for that. And then we also have chamber music, which is where all the chamber music students gather into a room, a performance room, and then we play for each other. Like a couple of chamber groups go per day to perform for the rest of the class, and we give our comments, we give our critiques, and then people benefit from those. Um, there are definitely classes that are not as exciting,
Mhm.
but they're still, it's still music. It's still fun to me, I
Yeah,
think. I have like music theory classes, which is basically like, the math and English and science of music
yeah,
combined into one.
pretty
And
much.
it's just really interesting to take a class that is music, which is something that I've always done as a hobby, as a passion, and to have it now be like a class, it was really cool. But it's pretty much just like any other STEM class. It's just music.
Awesome. And you're obviously describing that a lot of the classes that you have are, very music related, specific towards your major. And you can be as honest as you want. Would you say you're a lot more happier or satisfied with the classes you're taking now compared to high school?
Oh yeah, for sure. 1,000% yes. My first week of school, I was like, I can't believe I'm this happy right now. Like I was really upset, just like for a while, as everyone is going into college, you're away from everyone you know.
Mhm.
But it was just the fact that like every day I woke up, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to music school. Like I'm going to school for music. This is amazing. Like this is
Mhm.
more than I could have ever imagined. And it was so much better than Arcadia High School. I cannot even express that. Like, yeah, 1,000% yes.
I mean, obviously, I think it's because too, now you're taking, obviously, like we mentioned, classes that you enjoy, things that you're passionate about studying. Not everyone passionate about, because I feel like in high school you had to take a certain set of classes. You had to take your math class, English, history, science, language, and obviously you're interested in some of them. You're not interested in all of them. But now in college, when you have a schedule that's a lot more personalized to what you enjoy, and you can even choose your GE class or what you want. So if you had the opportunity to do so, you could actually choose a class that you'd still be interested in studying that
Mhm.
wasn't focused on your concentration. So yeah, I definitely agree with you too. I think in college, at least for me being STEM student, I would say that my classes are harder, but I enjoy them a lot more because it's a lot more interesting, and it actually makes me enjoy wanting to studying them because it's better than just like, oh, I have a test for this class, I don't want to do it, and you lose all those motivations. So yeah,
Yeah.
all right, awesome. And I guess like being a music student, we've touched up on this for other students as well too, talking about extracurriculars in particular. Now I
Mhm.
feel like in music, it almost feels like, I feel like, at least in my opinion, what I've seen from music students, I feel like music in itself can sometimes have like already implied extracurricular activity because you're already performing, like you mentioned, in front of other students, or doing performances every now and then. I've seen your social media, you've been having a couple of performances here and there, and I think that's actually really awesome that you get the opportunity to do so. But I would say, other than music, is there any like extracurriculars that you're doing that isn't music related, or if not, then what are the other like music related extracurriculars you are doing?
Um, I think everything I'm doing is music related. Yeah, everything I'm doing is music related. It might not be like performance related, but it still had something to do with the conservatory. I am almost part of a professional music fraternity called Mu Phi Epsilon. I still haven't been initiated yet because of the coronavirus, but hopefully in the fall I will be. Um, and that's just like it's a really fun way for me to be able to meet people in the conservatory and it's a professional frat, so it's not like a party social frat or anything like that. So I learn things, I have opportunities through them, I can get scholarships and stuff. So it's a really great opportunity, I think, for me to branch out more. I'm also now the treasurer of our conservatory student senate, which is, it's the student body of the
Yeah.
conservatory. And those are the two big organizations I'm in, and they're both music related, but they're different aspects of music. So I think that's one cool thing about music is that, there are so many parts of music, so many things on the spectrum that you can say you're in music, but you're in something like completely different than someone else in music. So yeah, I mean, music can be your career and your extracurricular.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I think I just mentioned it because I feel like a lot of students, they're so focused in finding clubs or groups of joins that pertain to their major, especially if you're like a pre-med, pre-law student, like one of those graduate students who, you do have to end up taking some sort of role in those things. But I think it's important to find those extracurriculars. But in the case for you, finding, if you are going to go into an extracurricular activity that is related to what you're studying, like, music in some way, shape, or form, choosing something that you enjoy, and obviously based on what you're saying, and even getting a treasure spot already incoming, your own sophomore year, I think that's really great because it shows that you were interested in what kind of activities and clubs you were joining. So that's awesome. And I think just another thing to talk about college is that we're both from Southern California, and obviously U of P is a lot more NorCal. So I guess my question here is like, what was your biggest challenge going into college, or like, during college, especially being so far from home and not being to your your own comfortable environment, what would you say was the biggest challenge, going into college?
I think physically moving to NorCal, it wasn't a big deal for me at first because I mean my original idea was to move to the East Coast, so that was okay for me. But it was just being in a school where I knew nobody. I knew one person there, but I would, they were in a completely different field from me. I never saw them. I saw them maybe a couple times at school, but they weren't, someone that I could really be like, hey, like, go with me to class, help me with this, whatever.
Yeah.
So it was really weird for the first time in my life not knowing anybody at school because I feel like that's what we've all kind of done, like, through all 12 years of school plus kindergarten and preschool, whatever. There's always someone you know,
Mhm.
and you can always be like, hey, like, let's go hang out together. So, you're not alone. So for the first few weeks, I was like, I don't know anybody. Hi, someone help me. So that was really scary. But, eventually you kind of meet people, you get to know people, and, things are okay. But I think the physical aspect of moving to NorCal for me wasn't that big of a deal because, it was just NorCal. It
Yeah,
wasn't
that's
out of state or anything, so that was okay.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Especially, coming even though ours graduating class was huge. I feel like for you, obviously not many students went to UOP. It was like either a UC school or some
Yeah.
other private school. Like for me, USC, we had a lot of students that I know. So I knew a lot of people in my class. In fact, my roommate was from Arcadia, so it was pretty easy to settle in that aspect. So I
Mhm.
think, yeah, definitely, being able to branch out to people, just being more social, getting out of your comfort zone. I think it's a good thing to like kind of a good life skill to have, especially since after college with whatever you're doing, you're going to be outside the comfort zone. You're never going to have that one person who, I guess you can say, always by your side in some aspects. So yeah, I think that's a really good thing to mention. And I guess just from here, just to wrap up the entire video, I guess if you could give advice to high school students, whether that be for college application, what life is like in college, or just general life advice, and holistically,
Mhm.
what would that be? Like, what would you tell those students?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I have to say to anybody applying for college is just apply for the college that you want for a major that you want. Don't apply because someone told you to. Don't apply because the school has some fancy name that everybody knows. Especially if you're someone from an Asian family, don't let your family members pressure you into applying for a school just because they think it sounds really cool. I still have family members that are like, oh, you should transfer to USC because they have a cool name, they have a fancy name. And, just don't let people pressure you into applying for a school just because they think it's a cool school and they think it's a good school. Because 90% of the time, they don't know what they're talking about. They just like the name. And yes, like USC is a great school. I'm not bashing on them or anything. I'm
Yeah,
just saying, apply for what you want to do. Apply for the major that you want, for a life that you want, for a career that you want. Um, don't let, the stereotypes of college is, push you in a different direction because it's really important that people start changing the stigma around applying for these specific colleges when there are so many other amazing colleges that people can go to and succeed in. And I think especially coming from Arcadia High School, like we just need to stop that stigma stereotype around these name colleges because every college has their benefits, every college has their pluses and minuses, and I think people just really need to start applying for what they want for a school that they think will fit them. Let the school fit you, don't let you fit the school. That's what.
exactly. That's awesome. And I think that's definitely an important message to send, that it's not about the college you go to, it's about what you make of it, and like, what you achieve in college. And I agree, as much as I would like you to come down to USC and obviously stuff like that, I obviously know that holistically you would probably thrive and succeed a lot better at UOP, especially with their music program and whatnot. So yeah, obviously, I feel like those rankings and this kind of, that stereotype of, oh, Ivy League school, those huge name schools that are easily recognizable. Yes, I mean, that's good in some aspect, but I feel like, you probably won't be happy at that school, or it might be super difficult for you, or maybe not even good for your own major. You just got in for some, I don't know, random major, and then now you're at that school. But yeah, I definitely think that's really good advice. And even if you don't know your major, just finding schools that will fit the other aspects of you, personality wise, the environment, even tuition's another factor. I mean, it's a whole nother story. But yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, but I mean, obviously, thank you, Charlotte, so much for talking to us, especially, giving us your musical background. And yeah, we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to talk about this. I'll talk about it to anybody if they ever want. I'm, free to share my wisdom.
That's awesome. And yeah, for everyone watching this, we hope that obviously you get some great knowledge from this because obviously, I've known Charlotte for like the longest time ever, and she's like super experienced and she's super passionate about music. So, but yeah, other than that, thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.